Welcome back to Let's Make a Game, a channel about making computer role-playing games using the free program Twine and the Sugarcube format for Twine. In this video, I would like to continue my series on adapting the fighting fantasy rules to Twine, and in particular, I would like to talk about the introduction to the game that I am in the process of writing, which uses a subgenre of science fiction called Sword and Planet, which I discussed a couple of videos ago. First, I will read you the introduction. The money the scientist offered was good, ridiculously good if you'd stopped to think about it, but you didn't. You needed it to be true, and so you believed it was. You didn't notice that the questions they asked you had very little to do with physics, and a lot to do with whether anyone would miss you. When they told you to stand in the chamber, you stood in the chamber. By the time you noticed anything was wrong, it was a million miles too late. And then there is a button that says continue, and when we click continue, we get a blank screen because I haven't written anything else, and we also get a character, a normal character, this time skill 8, stamina 22 and luck 10, but if I restart the game, it'll be different. It's just a normal character using the sort of core rules. There's no extra attributes, although there often is. There's no sort of choice of equipment or anything as yet. And the reason for that is twofold. Sword and Planet characters, main characters, are not very varied in terms of their abilities. They tend to be really good swordsmen, I guess. They tend to be good fighters. They tend to be better with a sword, better than a sword with anyone, perhaps, or certainly sort of at least as good with a sword as anyone that they meet. You don't get a lot of wizards. You don't get a lot of people who have sort of powers that are analogous to magic, but explained in a quasi-scientific way. Generally speaking, they can't knock people off. They can't knock people down with their thoughts or sort of do anything spectacular. John Carter from the Barsoom series, which really is the template for this subgenre, can leap very high because he's from Earth, which has a higher gravity than Mars, and so he can leap really high, which, by the way, was the inspiration for Superman. Originally, Superman couldn't fly. He could leap tall buildings with a single bound, because the authors or the creators of Superman thought, well, what if someone from a heavier gravity planet came to Earth? He'd be like John Carter, but on Earth. Superman only started flying because they were making, I think it was cartoons, and the people who were making the cartoons thought that having someone jump over buildings looked a bit silly, and that's why they changed it to flying. But so he can leap really high, and the Martian telepathy doesn't work on him, so Martians can't read his thoughts, and I think from memory he can't read their thoughts either. So that's sort of a power in the context of Mars, but that just makes him a normal. That's just like being a normal person on Earth. His main thing is that he's a great swordsman, a great sort of fighter, a great warrior. And that tends to be true of other main characters in the subgenre. You certainly might have other characters that have other abilities. Certainly in Barsoom, he mentions specifically that healing is super advanced on Mars. It's one of the ways in which they're not primitive. They have really great medicine. And so if you don't die in a fight, you'll probably be fine quite quickly because they can heal you really quickly. So it's sort of a plot convenience. It allows him to have these really savage sword fights, and there's a sort of reason why. Well, hang on, why doesn't he sort of eventually die of his wounds? Well, it's because he's sort of up and back to full health, as if he'd recovered for months and months after a few minutes due to sort of advanced Martian medicine. So you have powers and abilities like that, but the people who wield them tend not to be the main characters. You have scientists, but they tend to be villains. So it's a varied world, but the heroes, the main characters, tend to be pretty vanilla warriors. Actually, in Dungeons and Dragons, the fighter was originally called the Fighting Man, and that is almost certainly because one of the books in the Barsoom series is called Fighting Man of Mars. So John Carter was probably one of the sort of templates for what a fighter is like. Conan was probably the other main origin of their image of a fighter, or as they originally called it, a fighting man. So in short, I feel like the basic attributes probably cover the sort of character that we're talking about. And that if I want to distinguish different characters, I will probably distinguish them perhaps by skills, or special abilities. Perhaps there'll be some sort of, perhaps everyone gets the normal skill, stamina and luck, but then there's some special abilities that might come into play, some extra special abilities that might come into play at particular points in the narrative. And my plan is to have more than one of these origins, and then have the skills, the special abilities depend on the nature of the origin. So this one, it implies that you are financially sort of down and out. You were suffering poverty, and you were sort of desperate for money. So maybe this character would be, perhaps they have a bit of a gambling problem, and that could be, I suppose, not a special ability, but maybe a flaw, or it could be an ability. Perhaps gambling will come up, and if you choose or randomize this beginning, because I haven't decided whether you will, when you have multiple beginnings, I haven't decided whether you will choose which one you want or get it assigned randomly. But perhaps this beginning means you are good at gambling, or perhaps it means that you are good at sort of surviving on the streets, that you can sort of make yourself comfortable and have a night's sleep on the streets of a city. That's a thing that could come up in a fighting fantasy adventure. In fact, I'm pretty sure that it has come up in a fighting fantasy adventure that I've played. And then that could be, well, if you have this introduction, then you don't need to roll. You know how to get out of sight and make yourself comfortable. Whereas if you've chosen some other beginning, you have to test your luck to see whether anything bad happens to you, or perhaps you lose some stamina because you can't quite, you can't quite get yourself warm, or perhaps you don't sleep well, and so your skill's going to be down for the next day or something like that. But this character avoids that, and then another character might, perhaps they're an astronaut or something like that, and then perhaps they know how to use advanced technology. Perhaps they recognize, oh, this machine, I can sort of, from looking at it, even though I'm not familiar with it, I can sort of work out what it probably does, and I can, either work out its function, or at least I can perhaps get a bonus on the roll to see if I work out its function, something like that. The only sort of coding thing that I want to draw your attention to is you can see that here you don't have a character. On the first page, there's no skill, stamina, and luck. It only happens when you press continue. And I felt like that was sort of dramatically, I don't know, I can't justify it exactly. I can't prove that it's right, but it felt more right, that you don't get your character until you sort of, as it were, reach the planet. Presumably this next paragraph will be set on the new planet, or perhaps it'll, you have some bit of text about how you feel yourself falling through millions of miles of space or something like that. And I'll show you how I did that, whether you think it's, dramatically justified or not. I'll show you how to do it in case you decide you want to do it. I have talked about this before, but it's worth reiterating because I've got a lot of new subscribers recently. You'll probably remember, I'll just zoom in, that we have story caption, and story caption tells us what's happening in the sidebar. So this is the relevant one that we want. And the two things that happen in the story caption is basically, one, we print the Fighting Fantasy logo, and then we have this table which gives the skill, stamina, and luck, the current and initial skill, stamina, and luck. And all I've done is I've enclosed that table in an if. So instead of automatically coming up, it only comes up if C is equal to 1. And so that whole thing is enclosed within an if and a slash if. And I have a little note on initialize which says $C set to 1 when the character has been rolled, which is maybe not a great way to just, that's not maybe not technically true, because you actually roll it on this page, I think. Yeah, you roll it on this page. So I probably should rephrase that. But what I mean is it's set to 1 when the character is to be displayed. And so initially it won't be, because by default $C is undefined. Every variable, if you haven't given it a value, it is undefined. In some languages, every variable you haven't given a value is 0. In other languages, if you try and refer to a variable that you haven't given a specific value, that creates an error and the program stops. In this one, it doesn't create an error, but it has a value of undefined. And then all we do, see all this combat stuff, it's still here, because of course we're going to need it. But all this is, there's no way to get to it now, because the whole program is just initialize, intro 2, and story caption. So we initialize things, that basically works. I won't go through that because I've gone through it before, but that now sends you to intro. We have include intro down the bottom. Intro is simply printing that beginning and then giving you a button which sends you to intro 2, and then intro 2 is just set C equals to 1. So when you are on this page, it'll execute this code, so it'll print the text and print the button, and then it'll print the sidebar code, which is in story caption. And in sidebar, it'll say print this logo. Yep. If C is equal to 1, well, C is not equal to 1, it's equal to undefined. So I'll just skip all the way down to there, and that's the bottom. That's of course the end of the page. So it just prints the logo. Whereas once you get to this page, it goes right, set C equal to 1, and now when it executes the sidebar on this page, it will say, is C equal to 1? Yes, it is. And so therefore it will execute all this code, giving you your character. All right, so that is the first introduction. As I say, my plan at the moment is to have multiple introductions and then to have those different introductions make a mechanical difference. I'd be interested in any feedback. I'm always trying to, give people what they want. So I'd be interested to know if you like the writing style. The introduction that I wrote is much shorter than a Fighting Fantasy introduction. Fighting Fantasy introductions are often several pages long, albeit the pages are quite small in a Fighting Fantasy book, but certainly normally an introduction would be much, much longer than this, but I decided I just prefer an introduction that's as short as possible. So that's just a subjective decision, and you may disagree. You may like the multi-page introduction. I always found them too long. I always went, I sort of skimmed through them, really. I wanted to know who I was and what my mission was, I guess. Okay, got it. I'm in a wilderness and I'm trying to get back to civilization. I'm on a mission to capture this thing for my tribe, whatever, right? That was really what I wanted, and I didn't want the story. But I know that other people feel differently. So I'd be interested in hearing what you have to say about that. And what you have to say about the story as I write more of it. But for now, I hope that was useful or interesting to at least some of you. And I hope you will tune in next time.